Millionaire father found his daughter kneeling scrubbing the floor at her son-in-law's house, and crying, he said. It was a rainy afternoon when William decided to visit Emily's house, something he rarely did unannounced. He was worried. In recent weeks, her responses to his calls had been vague, and the few times they had met, there was something in her eyes that haunted him, a dullness, a weight she seemed to carry in silence. Without overthinking, he got into his car and drove to his daughter's house. When he arrived, he noticed the curtains were closed, even though it was broad daylight. The house's facade looked worn, as if time had passed mercilessly over it, reflecting a neglect that didn't match the joy Emily had always shown in taking care of her home. William hesitated for a moment before knocking on the door, but then decided to turn the handle when he realized it was unlocked. Upon entering, he was met with an unsettling silence, broken only by the sound of rain tapping against the windows. What he saw in the living room almost stopped his heart. Emily was on her knees, scrubbing the marble floor with a brush while sobbing softly. A bucket of dirty water sat beside her, and her hands trembled as she worked frantically, as if her life depended on it. Her hair was tied up carelessly, and her face, marked by deep dark circles, bore an expression of exhaustion that went beyond the physical. William noticed a bruise on her arm, partially hidden by the sleeve of her shirt. He stood still for a few seconds, unable to move or speak, as a whirlwind of emotions took over him: shock, anger, guilt. How had he, a man who always prided himself on protecting his family, allowed his daughter to end up like this? He took a step forward, and the creak of the wooden floor under his feet made Emily look up. When their eyes met, she froze, as if caught committing a crime. "Dad? What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice trembling as she hurried to stand up and hide her shaking hands behind her back. William didn't respond immediately. He just looked at her, feeling as though the ground had crumbled beneath him. When he finally found his voice, it came out steadier than he expected. "What's going on here, Emily? Who did this to you?" She looked away, tears welling up in her eyes again. "It's nothing. I'm fine. I'm just tired." Her attempt to hide the truth was as fragile as her posture in that moment. William stepped closer, ignoring the bucket spilling water on the floor, and gently took her hands, revealing the marks on her skin. A deep pain struck him as he realized how fragile and defeated his daughter seemed. "This isn't tiredness, Emily. This is fear. And I want to know who you're afraid of." She tried to resist but eventually broke down into silent sobs. Unable to maintain her facade, she confessed through her tears, "It's Jack, Dad. He's changed. He's not the man I married anymore." William hugged Emily, feeling her pain as if it were his own. In that moment, he knew he would do anything to get her out of this situation, no matter the cost. William stood in the middle of Emily's dimly lit living room, his arms still around her as she cried softly into his chest. He held her tightly, a surge of resolve coursing through him. After a moment, he gently guided her to sit on the couch, its cushions worn and faded, a stark contrast to the bright, lively decor he remembered from years ago. As they sat, William's eyes roamed the room, taking in its oppressive atmosphere. The air was stale, thick with a kind of tension that seemed to linger even in Emily's absence. The walls, once adorned with cheerful pictures of family vacations and milestones, were now barren, save for a few crooked frames. A wedding photo of Emily and Jack hung near the doorway, the glass cracked. It was as if the house itself bore the weight of her unhappiness. "Emily," William began, his voice steady but gentle, "how long has it been like this?" She hesitated, twisting a tissue in her hands. "I don't know. Maybe 2 years. It started slowly, you know. Little things at first. He'd get upset over small mistakes, and then, it just got worse." William frowned, his jaw tightening. "Did you tell anyone? Your friends? Anyone at all?" She shook her head. "Jack didn't let me. He'd say it was our business, that no one else needed to know. He's always been so controlling, Dad. At first, I thought he was just protective, but now I see. I was so wrong. Her voice broke, and William reached for her hand, squeezing it reassuringly. You're not wrong, Emily. You were deceived by someone you trusted. That's not your fault. But this ends now. Emily looked up at him, her eyes red and swollen. It's not that simple. Jack, he has connections. He knows people who can make things difficult. I don't even know how to start leaving him. William's stomach churned with anger, but he forced himself to stay calm. We'll figure it out together. First, you need to tell me everything. I need to understand what we're up against. She nodded slowly, and for the next hour, Emily poured out her heart. She told William about the verbal abuse, the gaslighting, and the growing sense of isolation Jack had imposed on her. She explained how he monitored her phone calls, controlled the money, and even decided who she could or couldn't talk to. William listened intently, his fists clenching with every detail. But what shocked him the most was when Emily revealed the bruises weren't just from physical arguments. He makes me clean obsessively, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. If he comes home and the house isn't perfect, he loses it. It was as though every word lit a fire inside William. He stood abruptly, pacing the room. This isn't just abuse, Emily. This is torment. And I'll be damned if I let him get away with it. Emily flinched slightly at his tone, and he softened immediately, kneeling before her. I'm sorry, he said gently. I'm just so angry that you've had to endure this. But you're not alone anymore. Do you hear me? You're not alone. She nodded, her lips trembling, and for the first time, William saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. As they sat in silence for a moment, William's phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it at first, but then it buzzed again. Finally, he pulled it out and glanced at the screen. A message from his assistant, detailing irregularities in the company's accounts. Normally, he would have dismissed it as a routine error, but given everything he'd just heard, it made him pause. Emily, he said, his voice low and deliberate, has Jack ever mentioned anything about my company? About any kind of involvement he might have with it? She looked confused. Not really. He always acts like your company is beneath him. But now that you mention it, there was this one time. I overheard him on the phone. He was arguing with someone, saying something about numbers not adding up. I didn't understand it, but it sounded serious. William's mind raced, connecting dots he hadn't even known existed. The financial discrepancies, Jack's control over Emily, the strange calls. A picture was beginning to form, and it wasn't just about an abusive husband. There was something more. Something bigger. And whatever it was, William would uncover it. William's heart pounded as the pieces started to align. He stood and paced the room, his mind racing. The irregularities at his company, Emily's mention of Jack's suspicious phone calls, it all felt connected. He turned to Emily, who sat silently on the couch, her hands gripping the tissue in her lap. Emily, he said carefully, do you remember anything specific about that phone call? Anything Jack said that stood out? She frowned, thinking. I think he mentioned an account number or a project name. Something like Horizon. No, maybe Horizon Solutions. He was furious, saying someone messed it up and that it could ruin everything if it got out. William stopped in his tracks. Horizon Solutions was a subsidiary of his company, a smaller branch that handled supply chain logistics. It was one of the areas where the recent financial discrepancies had been flagged. His chest tightened. Jack wasn't just controlling Emily, he was using her connection to William's company for something shady. I need to check something, William muttered, pulling out his phone. He called Clara, his trusted lawyer and friend. Clara, he said urgently when she answered. I need you to look into something for me. Horizon Solutions, Dig into their accounts, their contracts, everything. Focus on any transactions or activity connected to Jack Anderson. Clara didn't hesitate. I'll get on it immediately. Are you okay, William? You sound tense. I'll explain later, he replied, glancing at Emily, who was watching him with a mixture of fear and hope. Just find what you can, fast. After ending the call, William sat back down beside Emily. I need you to be honest with me. Is there anything else Jack might have mentioned or done that seemed odd? Anything at all? She hesitated, then said, there was a USB drive. I found it in his study a while ago when I was cleaning. He caught me holding it and got so angry, I thought he was going to. She stopped, shaking her head. He snatched it from me and said it was work-related, that I shouldn't touch his things. Do you know where it is now? William asked, his voice steady but intense. Emily bit her lip. He usually keeps things like that in his desk drawer. But, Dad, if he catches me looking again. You won't be alone, William interrupted. We'll find it together. Tonight, when he's not home. Emily nodded reluctantly, her trust in her father outweighing her fear. The hours passed slowly. William stayed with Emily, helping her pack a few essentials in case they needed to leave quickly. He tried to reassure her, but his own nerves were on edge. What if Jack returned early? What if the situation escalated before he could protect her? Finally, evening fell, and Emily checked her phone. Jack has a meeting tonight. He won't be back for hours, she said. William nodded. Let's do this. They crept into Jack's study, a room that felt as oppressive as the rest of the house. The heavy mahogany desk was neatly organized, with no sign of personal touches. William opened the drawers carefully, sifting through papers and office supplies. There, Emily whispered, pointing to a small, black USB drive tucked beneath a stack of folders. William grabbed it, his hands trembling slightly. Let's see what Jack has been hiding. They plugged the drive into William's laptop. A series of files popped up, labeled with cryptic names like Project Eclipse and Vendor Ops. As William opened the first file, his suspicions were confirmed. There were spreadsheets detailing off-the-books transactions, false invoices, and money transfers to offshore accounts. Jack wasn't just skimming from the company, he was deeply involved in a network of corruption. Emily gasped as she leaned over his shoulder. He's been doing this under your nose. Using your company. William clenched his jaw. Not anymore. This ends tonight. Before they could go further, a car engine roared outside. Emily's eyes widened in panic. He's home, she whispered, her voice trembling. William quickly removed the USB and closed the laptop. Go to your room, he instructed. Lock the door and don't come out until I say it's safe. Emily hesitated, but the urgency in his voice propelled her into action. As the front door opened, William stood in the study, ready to face Jack. Whatever happened next, he was prepared to protect his daughter and bring the truth to light. The door creaked open, and heavy footsteps echoed through the house. William stood in the study, his heart pounding but his resolve firm. Jack's voice called out, casual and cold, Emily. I'm back. William stayed silent, listening as Jack's footsteps moved closer. The tension in the air was suffocating, but William refused to let fear dominate him. When Jack appeared in the doorway, his surprise was evident. His confident smirk faltered for a moment as he registered William standing in the study. William, he said, his tone guarded. What a surprise. What are you doing here? William stepped forward, his face set like stone. I'm here because I finally see you for who you are, Jack. Jack raised an eyebrow, feigning confusion. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play dumb with me, William snapped, his voice low but seething with anger. I know what you've been doing, how you've been treating Emily. And I know about the corruption. The offshore accounts. The false invoices. Everything. Jack's expression shifted, a flicker of panic crossing his face before he quickly masked it with indignation. You're making wild accusations. Emily's been filling your head with lies, hasn't she? She's always been fragile. Emotional. William took another step closer, his eyes blazing. You don't get to twist this around. I've seen the proof. And let me make one thing clear, you will never hurt my daughter again. Jack's jaw tightened, and for a moment, the room was silent, the tension thick. Then, Jack's voice dropped, venomous and calculated. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into, William. You think you can just walk in here and lecture me? You're playing a dangerous game. Dangerous? William echoed, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. The only danger here is you. But not for long. Jack's mask of control slipped, and his anger flared. You don't understand how deep this goes. You think you're protecting Emily, but you're just putting her in more danger. Do you really want to gamble her safety on your self-righteous crusade? William's eyes narrowed. Is that a threat? It's a reality, Jack replied, his voice sharp. You think you can expose me without consequences? The people I work with, they don't forgive or forget. William felt his rage boiling over but forced himself to stay composed. We'll see how untouchable you are when the authorities get their hands on that USB drive. Jack's eyes darted briefly to the desk, and his expression darkened. You took it, he hissed. That was a mistake. Before William could react, Jack lunged at him, his movements fueled by desperation. The two men grappled, knocking over a lamp and scattering papers from the desk. William, though older, held his ground, using his strength and determination to push Jack back. Emily! Jack shouted as he struggled against William. Come out here. Now. Leave her out of this. William growled, managing to shove Jack against the wall. Emily's voice called from upstairs, shaking but resolute. I'm not coming out, Jack. Not ever. Her defiance seemed to ignite something in William, giving him the strength to grab Jack by the collar and pin him in place. You hear that? William said, his voice steady and commanding. She's done with you. And so am I. Jack struggled, his face contorted with rage. You're making a mistake, he spat. You're going to regret this. The sound of sirens in the distance broke through the tension, growing louder with each passing second. Jack's eyes widened in realization. You called the police, he snarled, his voice tinged with panic. William tightened his grip. I'm not just a businessman, Jack. I'm a father. And I will do whatever it takes to protect my daughter. As the flashing red and blue lights illuminated the windows, William stepped back, letting Jack slump against the wall. Moments later, the front door burst open, and officers entered, weapons drawn. Jack Anderson, one of them called. You're under arrest. Jack's defiance evaporated as the officers restrained him, reading him his rights. He glared at William one last time as he was led away, his voice a low snarl. This isn't over. William stood in the middle of the study, his chest heaving as the adrenaline coursed through him. The storm had passed, but he knew the fight was far from over. Emily emerged from her room, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and relief. Dad, is it really over? William turned to her, his expression softening. He wrapped her in a tight embrace. It's over for now, he said gently. But we'll face whatever comes next. Together. The house was eerily quiet after the chaos subsided. The flashing lights of the police cars had faded, leaving a tense stillness behind. Emily clung to William as they stood in the study, both of them shaken but united in their resolve. William stepped back slightly, holding Emily's shoulders. Are you okay? He asked, his voice soft but full of concern. She nodded, though her eyes betrayed her lingering fear. I think so, she whispered. It just doesn't feel real yet. Jack, he's gone. William brushed a strand of hair from her face. He is. And he's not coming back. Emily's gaze fell to the scattered papers on the floor, the remnants of Jack's fury during their confrontation. Do you think it's really over, Dad? What if he meant what he said? What if there are people after us now? William's jaw tightened as he considered her words. We'll deal with it. Clara's already looking into this, and now the police have the USB. Jack's connections won't matter once everything comes to light. Emily hesitated, then nodded. I trust you. They spent the next hour gathering their things. William insisted that Emily pack enough for at least a week. You're coming with me, he said firmly. There's no way I'm leaving you here alone. By the time they left the house, it was past midnight. The cool night air was a stark contrast to the suffocating atmosphere inside. Emily hesitated on the porch, looking back at the house she had once called home. I thought this place was going to be my forever, she murmured. But it was a prison. William put an arm around her shoulders. It's not your home anymore, Emily. Home is wherever you feel safe. And we'll find that again. They drove in silence to William's house, the tension slowly giving way to exhaustion. When they arrived, William led Emily to the guest room, ensuring she had everything she needed. Get some rest, he told her. Tomorrow, we start rebuilding. Together. Emily gave him a faint smile. Thank you, Dad. For everything. William kissed her forehead. There's nothing to thank me for. I'm just doing what I should have done a long time ago. Once Emily was settled, William retreated to his office. He sat at his desk, the USB drive in his hand, and stared at it for a long moment. It felt heavier than it should, as if it carried the weight of all the secrets and lies Jack had built his life on. Determined to stay ahead of whatever was coming, William plugged the USB into his computer again. The files were damning, clear evidence of Jack's involvement in a network of fraud, bribery, and money laundering. But as William dug deeper, he noticed something even more alarming. A series of emails, buried among the financial records, hinted at a larger operation. Names of high-ranking officials and business partners were mentioned, and the tone of the messages suggested that Jack was just a small piece of a much larger puzzle. William leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. This wasn't just about Jack anymore. The corruption extended far beyond anything he had imagined, and his company was at the center of it. He picked up his phone and called Clara, despite the late hour. She answered groggily but instantly alert when she heard his tone. Clara, he began, we're in deeper than I thought. The USB isn't just about Jack. It's bigger. Much bigger. How much bigger? Clara asked, her voice serious. Big enough to involve politicians, executives, and international accounts, William replied. We're going to need more than the police for this. Clara was silent for a moment, then said, bring me everything. We'll start compiling it tomorrow. And William, be careful. If this is as big as it sounds, you're stepping into dangerous territory. I know, he said quietly. But I don't have a choice. As he ended the call, William glanced toward the guest room where Emily was sleeping. His resolve hardened. He had already failed to protect her once. He wouldn't let it happen again. Whatever it took, he would uncover the truth and bring down the people who had enabled Jack's cruelty. But deep down, he knew the road ahead would test him in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The morning light filtered through the curtains of William's home, casting a warm glow that belied the storm brewing beneath the surface. Emily stirred in the guest room, her eyes fluttering open as the events of the previous night rushed back. Her heart ached with a mix of relief and apprehension. She was free from Jack, but the shadows of his actions, and his threats, still loomed large. Meanwhile, William sat in his office, already deep in thought. He hadn't slept much, spending the early hours poring over the files from the USB and jotting down notes. The more he uncovered, the clearer it became that Jack wasn't working alone. His name appeared in contracts and correspondence tied to a web of individuals, some of whom were disturbingly powerful. William's fury simmered, but he channeled it into focus. A soft knock on the office door broke his concentration. Emily peeked in, her face pale but determined. "Good morning," she said hesitantly. I wanted to thank you again. For everything." William stood and walked to her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to thank me. You're my daughter. I'll always protect you." She nodded, her gaze shifting to the cluttered desk behind him. "Did you find anything?" William hesitated, unsure how much to share. But he saw the resolve in her eyes and decided she deserved the truth. "Yes," he admitted. "Jack wasn't just taking money. He was part of something much larger, a network of corruption that reaches far beyond my company." Emily's breath hitched. "What do we do now?" "We fight back," William said firmly. "But it's not going to be easy. These people won't go down without a fight. I need you to stay safe and trust me to handle this." Emily hesitated, then said, "I want to help. I've been quiet for too long, Dad. If there's something I can do, tell me." William's heart swelled with pride, but he also felt a pang of worry. "I admire your courage, Emily, but this is dangerous. These aren't just business people, they're criminals. I need you to stay out of harm's way." Emily nodded reluctantly. "Okay. But if you need me, I'll be here." As she left the office, William's phone buzzed. It was Clara. "I've gone through some of the initial data," she said. "You were right. This is bigger than we thought. I'm seeing connections to major players, politicians, corporate executives, even foreign entities. It's a web, and Jack was just one thread." "Then we need to start pulling on those threads," William replied. "What's our first move?" Clara's voice was firm. "We need a safe meeting place to review everything. Somewhere private. And we'll need allies, people we can trust in law enforcement and the media. If we're going to expose this, we need to do it strategically." "Agreed," William said. "I'll set it up." By the afternoon, William had arranged a meeting with Clara and a trusted investigative journalist named Victor Ortiz. They met at a secluded office space William had rented under a pseudonym. Victor was a sharp-eyed man in his 40s, with a reputation for taking down corrupt power players. He listened intently as William and Clara laid out what they had uncovered. "This is explosive," Victor said, scrolling through the files on the laptop. "If even half of this is accurate, it's going to rock the corporate and political world." "It's accurate," William said grimly. "And we're going to make sure it sees the light of day." Victor leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "We'll need to be careful. If these people feel cornered, they could retaliate. Have you considered what might happen to you and your family?" "I have," William replied. "But I won't back down. They've already taken too much from Emily. I won't let them destroy anyone else." Victor nodded. "All right. I'll start digging into the names on these emails and transactions. But be ready, once this story breaks, there's no turning back." As they wrapped up the meeting, William felt a surge of determination. The fight was just beginning, but for the first time in weeks, he felt like he was regaining control. When he returned home, Emily was waiting for him in the living room. "How did it go?" she asked. "We've got a plan," William said, sitting beside her. "It's going to take time, but we'll bring them down." Emily reached for his hand, her grip firm. "I believe in you, Dad. And I'm not afraid anymore." Her words were like a balm to William's weary heart. No matter how difficult the road ahead, they were in this together, and he wouldn't stop until justice was served. Over the next few days, the atmosphere in William's home became a mix of cautious optimism and simmering tension. William and Clara worked tirelessly to analyze the data from the USB drive, cross-referencing names and transactions, while Victor quietly began reaching out to his sources to verify the information. Emily, determined to contribute, spent her time organizing the files and sorting through the tangled web of connections. One evening, as William and Emily sat together in the living room, Emily set down her laptop and looked at her father. "Dad," she began hesitantly, "do you think Jack knew this would all come crashing down? Or did he believe he could keep getting away with it forever?" William leaned back, considering her question. "Men like Jack," he said slowly, "are blinded by their own arrogance. They believe they're untouchable, that they can manipulate people and systems without consequence. But they always leave a trail. And we found his." Emily nodded, her expression thoughtful. "It's strange. For so long, I thought I was powerless. That he had all the control. But now, I feel like I'm finally taking it back." William reached over and squeezed her hand. "You are. And you're stronger than you realize." Their conversation was interrupted by the buzzing of William's phone. It was Clara. He answered quickly, his tone brisk. "Clara. What's new?" Her voice was tense. "William, I've been digging into one of the key figures tied to Jack, Marco de la Vega. He's a high-level financier with connections to political campaigns and international trade deals. And he's dangerous. If we're going to expose him, we need to tread carefully." "Dangerous how?" William asked, his grip tightening on the phone. "He's been linked to several incidents where whistleblowers disappeared or faced accidents," Clara replied. "He won't hesitate to protect himself." William's jaw tightened. "What's our next move?" "We need to keep gathering evidence, but we also need to ensure our safety," Clara said. "I'll reach out to a few trusted law enforcement contacts. In the meantime, you and Emily need to stay vigilant. De la Vega's people will retaliate if they catch wind of what we're doing." After ending the call, William turned to Emily, who had been listening intently. "Things are about to get more dangerous," he said. "We need to be prepared." Emily's resolve didn't waver. "I'm not going anywhere, Dad. Whatever happens, I'm staying with you." The next morning, Victor called with an update. "I've verified some of the data," he said. "Marco de la Vega is definitely involved, and he's funneling money through shell companies linked to your business. This is big, William. But it also means we're running out of time. They'll notice us digging sooner rather than later." William nodded, even though Victor couldn't see him. "Then we need to act fast. How soon can you publish?" Victor hesitated. "Not yet. I need more corroboration. If we go public too soon, they'll discredit us before we can prove anything. But I'm getting close." Later that evening, as William and Emily were reviewing more files, the sound of tires screeching outside made them both freeze. William stood quickly, motioning for Emily to stay put. "Stay here," he said firmly, moving toward the window. He peeked through the curtains and saw a black SUV idling on the street, its windows tinted. After a moment, the SUV sped off, disappearing into the night. William returned to the living room, his expression grim. "We've been noticed," he said. That was a warning. Emily's face paled, but she straightened her posture. "What do we do?" "We stay alert," William said. "And we don't let fear stop us. They want us to back off. That means we're getting close to something they don't want us to find." Emily nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. "I won't let them scare me, Dad. Not anymore." William placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We're in this together. And we're not stopping until we bring them all down." As the night wore on, the weight of what lay ahead settled over them. But amidst the fear, there was also determination, a shared resolve to see this fight through to the end, no matter the cost. The night after the SUV incident was restless. Emily tossed and turned in the guest room, her mind plagued by questions and fears. In his office, William worked late into the night, trying to stay one step ahead of the threats closing in. The house, usually a haven, now felt like a battlefield where every sound carried the weight of uncertainty. At dawn, William was awakened by his phone buzzing insistently on the desk where he had dozed off. It was Clara. "William," she said urgently, skipping any pleasantries, "I just got off the phone with one of my law enforcement contacts. There's chatter about Marco de la Vega being tipped off. He knows someone's coming after him. We're running out of time to stay in the shadows." William's stomach sank. "Do they know it's us?" "They don't know specifics," Clara replied, "but they're circling. You and Emily need to be extra careful. And Victor needs to move faster." "I'll talk to him," William said. "We'll figure this out." After hanging up, William found Emily in the kitchen, making coffee. She looked up at him, her face etched with determination despite the faint shadows under her eyes. "What is it, Dad? You look tense." "De la Vega knows someone's digging into him," William admitted. "Clara says we need to accelerate things." Emily set the coffee pot down, her hand steady. "Then let's do it. What's the plan?" William admired her courage but couldn't shake his unease. "First, I need to call Victor. Then, I want you to pack an emergency bag, just in case." "I'm not leaving you," Emily said firmly. "I know," William replied. "But we need to be ready for anything." William called Victor, who answered on the first ring. "Victor," William said, "we've been compromised. De la Vega knows someone's investigating him. We need to move." Victor's voice was calm but serious. "I've been expecting this. I've already set up an off-the-record meeting with a federal investigator I trust. She's discreet and has the authority to act on this once we have enough evidence. Can you meet me this afternoon?" William agreed, and they arranged a time and place, a quiet cafe in a nearby town, chosen for its low-profile atmosphere. By midday, William and Emily were en route to the meeting. Emily insisted on coming, arguing that she was already involved and wanted to stay by her father's side. William reluctantly agreed, knowing how stubborn she could be when her mind was set. The cafe was small and unassuming, with only a handful of patrons. Victor was seated in a corner booth, a woman in a tailored blazer beside him. She introduced herself as Agent Sofia Reyes, her sharp eyes immediately giving the impression of someone who missed nothing. William laid out everything they had found, including the files from the USB in Clara's research. Agent Reyes listened intently, occasionally taking notes. "This is extensive," she said finally, her tone impressed. "It's enough to start an investigation, but we'll need more to ensure this sticks. De la Vega has resources, he'll use every loophole to wriggle out of this if we don't have an airtight case." Victor leaned forward. "I have sources digging into his operations. We'll get what we need, but we need your protection for William and Emily. They've already been targeted." Agent Reyes nodded. "I'll assign someone to monitor their house. But you both need to stay vigilant. These people won't hesitate to use violence to protect their interests." Emily spoke up, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "We're ready for that. We just want to make sure they don't hurt anyone else." Agent Reyes gave her a small, approving smile. "That kind of bravery is rare. But don't let it cloud your judgment. If things escalate, your safety has to come first." As they left the cafe, the tension between William and Emily was palpable. The reality of their situation was sinking in deeper with each passing moment. "Are you scared?" Emily asked as they got into the car. William glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Yes," he admitted after a moment. "But fear doesn't matter right now. What matters is seeing this through." Emily reached over and squeezed his hand. We will. Together. As they drove home, a black car appeared in the rearview mirror, following at a steady distance. William's heart quickened, but he kept his voice calm. Emily, don't look back. Just trust me. He turned off the main road, taking an unfamiliar route through a series of side streets. The car behind them followed, its presence unmistakable now. Emily noticed William's tightened grip on the wheel. Dad, what's going on? We've got company, he said tersely. Without warning, William turned sharply onto a gravel road, the tires kicking up a cloud of dust. The pursuing car hesitated for a moment before following. Hold on, William said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through him. The chase continued for several tense minutes until William spotted a clearing ahead. He made a sudden turn, pulling into the clearing and cutting the engine. Stay down, he told Emily, pulling out his phone to dial Clara. The black car slowed as it approached, its windows still too dark to see inside. William's heart pounded as he prepared for whatever came next, the weight of protecting his daughter fueling his resolve. The black car rolled to a stop at the edge of the clearing, its engine idling ominously. William crouched low in the driver's seat, his phone pressed to his ear as he spoke quickly to Clara. We've been followed, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Black sedan, tinted windows. We're in a clearing off Route 17, just past the gravel road turnoff. Clara's voice was sharp and steady. Stay put, and don't engage. I'll contact Agent Reyes and send backup. William ended the call and turned to Emily, who was huddled low in her seat, her wide eyes fixed on him. Stay down, he repeated, his voice firm but calm. Whatever happens, don't move until I say so. The black car's driver's side door opened slowly. A tall man in a dark suit stepped out, his movements deliberate. He scanned the clearing, his expression unreadable. A second man emerged from the passenger side, slightly shorter but equally imposing. William's heart raced as he watched them. He knew better than to assume they were simply there to talk. The taller man called out, his voice carrying across the clearing. William Carter, we just want to have a conversation. There's no need for this to get complicated. William didn't respond, his mind racing. He had no intention of engaging unless absolutely necessary. The shorter man moved to the back of their car and opened the trunk. William tensed as he watched him retrieve something. At first, it wasn't clear what. Then, the glint of metal caught the sunlight. A crowbar. The taller man spoke again, his tone colder now. We know you have something that doesn't belong to you. Hand it over, and we'll walk away. No harm done. William's grip tightened on the steering wheel. He couldn't risk giving up the USB drive, it was their only leverage. But he also couldn't let these men get anywhere near Emily. As the men began to approach the car, William's mind raced for a solution. Suddenly, an idea struck him. He reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a small flashlight. It wasn't much, but in the right hands, it could be a distraction. Emily, he whispered, handing her the flashlight. When I say go, shine this at their faces. Blind them, just for a second. Can you do that? Emily nodded, her hands trembling but steady enough to hold the flashlight. The men were now only a few feet away. The taller one spoke again, this time with a sharp edge to his voice. This is your last chance, Carter. Make it easy on yourself. William took a deep breath, then shouted, now. Emily turned on the flashlight and aimed it directly at the men's faces. The sudden burst of light startled them, forcing them to shield their eyes. William used the momentary distraction to his advantage. He started the car and slammed it into reverse, kicking up gravel as he backed out of the clearing at full speed. The men stumbled, disoriented, and one of them shouted angrily. The sedan roared to life behind them, its tires screeching as it gave chase. William navigated the narrow gravel road with precision, his eyes darting between the path ahead and the rearview mirror. "Dad, they're gaining on us!" Emily cried, clutching the dashboard. William's jaw tightened. Not for long. Ahead, he spotted a fork in the road and took the left turn sharply, nearly fishtailing in the process. The sedan followed, its engine growling as it tried to close the gap. William spotted a narrow trail that branched off from the main road, partially obscured by overgrown foliage. He made a split-second decision and veered onto it, the car bouncing violently over the uneven terrain. The sedan hesitated at the trail's entrance before attempting to follow. But the dense underbrush slowed its progress, giving William the advantage. As the trail wound deeper into the forest, the sedan's engine faded into the distance. Finally, William brought the car to a stop in a secluded spot, cutting the engine. He and Emily sat in silence for a moment, their breathing heavy. "Are they gone?" Emily whispered, her voice trembling. "For now," William replied, his voice steady but weary. "But this isn't over." He pulled out his phone again and called Clara. "We need to move fast. They know where we are, and they're not backing down." Clara's response was immediate. "I'm sending a secure extraction team to your location. Stay hidden until they arrive." William ended the call and turned to Emily. "Help is on the way. We just need to hold out a little longer." Emily nodded, her eyes filled with both fear and determination. "Whatever it takes, Dad. We're in this together." As they waited in the forest, William kept his eyes on the road, his mind racing with plans. He knew the stakes were higher than ever, but he also knew one thing for certain: he would protect his daughter, no matter the cost. The forest seemed to hold its breath as William and Emily sat in the car, the thick canopy above casting dappled shadows over the windshield. Every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig made William tense, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror and the narrow trail behind them. Emily sat clutching the flashlight tightly, her knuckles white, as if the small device was the last anchor of her resolve. Minutes dragged by, each one feeling like an hour. Finally, the faint hum of an engine echoed in the distance. William's pulse quickened, but he forced himself to stay calm. He glanced at Emily, who had frozen at the sound. "Stay quiet," he whispered. The hum grew louder, morphing into the unmistakable growl of an approaching vehicle. William craned his neck, straining to see through the foliage. The black sedan reappeared, crawling along the trail like a predator stalking its prey. "They're back," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. William nodded grimly. "Let's hope Clara's people are close." He reached into the center console and pulled out a small wrench he kept for emergencies. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. He handed Emily the flashlight again. "If they get too close, use this to blind them like before," he said. "But only if I tell you to." Emily nodded, her jaw set despite the fear in her eyes. The sedan rolled to a stop about 30 yards behind them. The same two men stepped out, this time looking angrier and more determined. They scanned the area, then started moving toward William and Emily's car. "Carter," the taller man shouted. "Enough games. Get out of the car, or we'll make you." William glanced at Emily. "Stay low. Don't move." He opened the car door slowly, stepping out with his hands raised. The wrench was tucked into his back pocket, hidden from view. "All right," he called out, his voice steady. "You've made your point. What do you want?" The men stopped a few feet away, their expressions hard and menacing. "We already told you," the taller man said. "Hand over the USB. Now." William shook his head. "I can't do that. It's already with the authorities. Coming after me is a waste of time." The shorter man sneered. "We'll see about that." The taller one stepped closer, his tone turning icy. "We're not here to negotiate, Carter. Either you give us what we want, or we'll take it." Before William could respond, the faint sound of an approaching helicopter cut through the air. The men exchanged uneasy glances, their composure slipping. "What the hell is that?" the shorter man muttered. William suppressed a grin. Clara's extraction team had arrived. The sound grew louder, and moments later, a sleek black helicopter appeared above the treetops. It hovered briefly before descending into a nearby clearing. The sudden gust of wind from the rotors sent leaves and debris flying, forcing the men to shield their faces. Two figures in tactical gear emerged from the helicopter, their movements swift and precise. One of them shouted through a megaphone. "This is a secure extraction team. Step away from the vehicle and drop any weapons." The men hesitated, their confidence clearly shaken. They exchanged a look, then backed away slowly toward their car. The taller one glared at William. "This isn't over, Carter," he spat before retreating into the sedan. The car roared to life and sped off, kicking up gravel as it disappeared down the trail. William exhaled deeply, the tension in his chest finally releasing. He turned back to the car and opened the door. "Emily, it's safe. Let's go." Emily climbed out, her face pale but resolute. "Who are they?" she asked, nodding toward the extraction team. "Friends," William said simply. The team escorted them to the helicopter, their movements professional and efficient. Once inside, William and Emily strapped in as the craft lifted off, the forest quickly shrinking beneath them. As they soared through the sky, Emily leaned closer to her father. "Where are we going?" "To a safe house," William replied. "Clara set it up. We'll regroup and figure out our next steps from there." Emily nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Despite everything, there was a flicker of determination in her eyes. For the first time in days, William felt a glimmer of hope. They were far from out of danger, but they were no longer alone. And that made all the difference. The helicopter touched down on a secluded helipad surrounded by dense forest. The air was crisp and quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos they had left behind. Two agents in tactical gear helped William and Emily disembark, guiding them to a modest cabin nestled among the trees. The cabin was unassuming, with weathered wooden walls and a covered porch. It looked like an ordinary retreat, but William could see the subtle signs of security: cameras discreetly placed in the eaves, reinforced door frames, and an antenna on the roof for secure communications. Inside, the space was utilitarian but comfortable. A large living area with sturdy furniture, a small kitchen stocked with supplies, and two bedrooms in the back. A map of the surrounding area was pinned to the wall, marked with red and blue pushpins. Agent Reyes was already waiting for them, seated at a table with Clara. They both stood as William and Emily entered. "Glad you made it," Reyes said, her tone brisk but warm. "We were tracking you after Clara called." "You had a close call." "Too close," William replied, his voice tight. He glanced at Emily, who was scanning the room with wide eyes. "But we made it, thanks to you." Clara stepped forward, her expression a mix of relief and determination. "We need to talk strategy. De La Vega's men won't stop until they either get the USB or eliminate the threat we pose. We have to strike before they regroup." William nodded. "What's the plan?" Reyes spread out a set of documents on the table. "We've identified key players in De La Vega's network, based on the data from the USB in Victor's investigation. Some are low-level operatives, but a few are major players with ties to international markets and political figures. If we can hit them where it hurts, financially and legally, we can dismantle the network." Emily, who had been quiet until now, stepped closer. "What about Jack? He was working with them. Can we use him to weaken their operation?" Reyes exchanged a glance with Clara. "Jack's arrest gives us leverage," Reyes said. "If we can convince him to cooperate, he could provide testimony and additional evidence. But that's a big if. Men like him don't turn easily." William's jaw tightened. Then we make it clear he has no choice. If Jack thinks there's a way out, he'll take it. We need to show him the walls are closing in. Clara nodded. We'll start with his legal situation. Pile on every charge we can and freeze his assets. When he realizes how deep he's in, he might crack. Emily folded her arms, her gaze steady. And if he doesn't? Reyes's expression hardened. Then we move forward without him. The evidence we already have is enough to implicate De La Vega and his inner circle. But it'll take time, and in the meantime, you both need to stay under the radar. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Reyes's team set up a secure communication line, while Clara worked on coordinating with Victor and legal authorities. William reviewed the files again, his mind racing as he pieced together the timeline of Jack's involvement. Emily took a break to explore the cabin, her steps tentative as she tried to process everything. She ended up on the porch, where the quiet rustling of leaves provided a moment of solace. William found her there, leaning against the railing and staring into the forest. He stepped up beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "How are you holding up?" he asked softly. She shrugged, her gaze distant. "It's just, a lot. Knowing how deep this goes, how many people are involved. I thought I knew Jack, but now I see I didn't know him at all." William nodded, his heart aching for her. "You're stronger than you think, Emily. You've been through so much, and you're still standing. That's what matters." She turned to him, her eyes glistening. "I'm scared, Dad. Not just for us, but for what happens next. What if we can't stop them?" William pulled her into a hug, holding her tightly. "We will. One step at a time. And you're not alone in this. We have people we can trust, and together, we'll see this through." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the team reconvened inside the cabin. Reyes brought news of a scheduled raid on one of De La Vega's key warehouses, set for the following morning. "This is our chance to hit them hard," Reyes said. "But we'll need to be ready for retaliation. Once we strike, there's no going back." William met her gaze, his voice firm. "We've come this far. We're not backing down now." The team spent the evening preparing, going over plans and contingencies. Emily, despite her exhaustion, insisted on helping, organizing files and double-checking details. When the lights were finally dimmed and the cabin grew quiet, William sat by the window, staring out into the darkness. The weight of the battle ahead pressed heavily on him, but he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Whatever it took, he would protect Emily and bring De La Vega's empire crashing down. Failure was not an option. The morning of the raid dawned cool and gray, the forest around the cabin shrouded in mist. The mood inside was tense but focused. Reyes's team moved with quiet efficiency, double-checking equipment and reviewing last-minute details. Clara and Victor worked at a makeshift command station, monitoring communication lines and tracking updates from law enforcement contacts. Emily emerged from her room wearing one of her father's old jackets, the oversized sleeves swallowing her hands. Her eyes were tired but determined. She found William in the kitchen, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. "You didn't sleep," she said, more a statement than a question. William handed her a mug and gave a small smile. "Neither did you." She took the coffee and sat at the table. "What happens after this raid? Will it be enough to stop them?" William sat across from her, his expression serious. "It'll be a major blow, but it won't end everything. De La Vega's network is big, and taking it down will take time. But this is a start, a chance to show them they're not untouchable." Emily nodded, her fingers wrapping tightly around the mug. "I'm ready for whatever comes next. I just want to see this through." William reached across the table, placing a hand over hers. "You've already come so far, Emily. No matter what happens, I'm proud of you." Before she could respond, Reyes entered the kitchen, her expression brisk. It's time. The raid team is in position, and we need to get to the command post. The group piled into an armored SUV, escorted by 2 other vehicles carrying Reyes's agents. The drive to the command post was tense, the hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of radio chatter the only sounds. Emily sat beside William, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. When they arrived at the command post, a temporary setup near the raid site, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Agents in tactical gear moved purposefully, checking weapons and finalizing plans. Large monitors displayed aerial footage of the warehouse, its perimeter guarded by De La Vega's men. Reyes addressed the group, her voice steady and authoritative. The target is a logistics hub central to De La Vega's operations. Intelligence indicates it's used to store cash, falsified documents, and sensitive data. Our goal is to seize as much as we can and detain key personnel. This is a high-risk operation, so stay sharp. As the agents prepared to deploy, William and Emily stood off to the side with Clara and Victor, watching the monitors. The tension was palpable. Victor leaned closer to William. This could be the breakthrough we've been waiting for. If they get the evidence from that warehouse, it's game over for De La Vega. William nodded, his eyes fixed on the screen. Let's hope it's enough. The raid began with surgical precision. Drone footage showed agents breaching the warehouse gates, neutralizing guards with swift efficiency. Gunfire erupted briefly, then faded as Reyes's team moved deeper into the building. Emily watched the screen, her breath held. "They're going to find something, right?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "They will," Clara assured her. "This place is too important to De La Vega's operation. He wouldn't leave it empty." Minutes felt like hours as the team swept through the warehouse. Finally, Reyes's voice crackled over the radio. "Command, we've secured the main office. Large quantities of cash, documents, and digital storage devices recovered. Uploading inventory now." A cheer erupted in the command post, but William remained focused. "They've still got to get out," he muttered. On the monitor, the agents began loading evidence into armored vehicles. Just as the last container was secured, a burst of movement caught the camera's attention. "Hostiles incoming!" Reyes's voice shouted over the radio. De La Vega's reinforcements had arrived. Several black SUVs screeched to a halt outside the warehouse, armed men pouring out. A firefight erupted, the screen lighting up with muzzle flashes. William's heart pounded as he gripped the edge of the table. "Come on," he whispered. Reyes's team responded with disciplined precision, holding their ground while retreating to the vehicles. Drone footage showed the agents making a break for the exit, bullets pinging off the armored sides of their convoy. "Casualty report?" Clara asked into the radio, her voice tight. "Minor injuries, no fatalities," Reyes replied. "We're moving out." The convoy sped away from the warehouse, leaving a trail of smoke and chaos behind. As they cleared the danger zone, Reyes's voice came through again. "Command, we're en route with the evidence. Operation successful." Relief washed over the command post, but William knew the fight wasn't over. The raid had dealt a major blow to De La Vega, but retaliation was inevitable. Emily turned to William, her eyes wide but resolute. "We did it," she said softly. "We took the first step," William replied. "Now we have to be ready for whatever comes next." As the convoy approached the command post, William felt a surge of both pride and determination. They had struck a blow against an empire of corruption, but the battle was far from won. As the convoy rolled into the command post, dust clouds billowing in its wake, the atmosphere buzzed with a mix of relief and urgency. Agents surrounded the vehicles, securing the perimeter as the doors of the lead truck opened. Reyes stepped out, her tactical gear smudged with dirt, but her expression was sharp and focused. "We've got everything," she said briskly, gesturing toward the vehicles. "Cash, falsified documents, digital storage, de la Vega's operation just took a massive hit. The command post erupted in a mix of cheers and hurried activity as agents began unloading the evidence. Clara immediately moved to the digital devices, her laptop already open to start analyzing their contents. William and Emily stood nearby, watching as the scene unfolded. Emily couldn't help but ask, "Is this enough to bring him down?" Reyes turned to her, a flicker of admiration in her otherwise serious expression. "It's a major blow, but de la Vega won't go down quietly. We need to act fast to lock this evidence into legal channels before he can retaliate." Victor joined them, holding a clipboard with an inventory list. "The cash alone is enough to cripple his network temporarily," he said. "But the real goldmine is the data. If those drives contain what we think they do, we'll have names, transactions, and offshore accounts." William nodded. "Then we can't waste time. What's the next step?" Reyes pointed to the command center, where a team was already connecting the digital drives to a secure terminal. "Clara and the tech team will start combing through the files. Meanwhile, I'll coordinate with federal agencies to ensure everything gets filed properly. We need to be airtight on this, no loopholes, no missing pieces." As the team dove into their work, William and Emily found a moment of quiet near the edge of the camp. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the forest. Emily leaned against a tree, her arms crossed. "Do you think he knows yet?" she asked softly. William glanced at her, understanding her meaning immediately. "De la Vega? Probably. Men like him don't stay blind for long. But that's why we're moving quickly. He can't fight back if we've already dismantled his operation." Emily exhaled, her breath visible in the cool evening air. "It's hard to believe we've come this far. A week ago, I was still living under Jack's control, feeling like I'd never get out. And now, this." William stepped closer, his voice steady. "You've come a long way, Emily. And you're stronger than ever. This isn't just about taking down de la Vega, it's about taking back control. For both of us." Before she could respond, Clara approached them, holding a tablet. Her expression was a mix of excitement and concern. "We found something," she said, glancing around to ensure no one else could overhear. One of the drives contained encrypted files labeled Priority. It took some work, but we managed to decrypt a few. It's worse than we thought." William and Emily followed Clara to the command center, where a screen displayed rows of emails, spreadsheets, and video files. Clara tapped on one of the emails, pulling it up for them to see. The email was from de la Vega to an unnamed associate. It outlined plans to move significant funds offshore, using coded language to reference bribes to high-ranking officials. More alarming, it included a list of potential targets, individuals or groups who had become problems. Emily's breath hitched as she scanned the list. "Is that my name?" Clara nodded grimly. "You're on it. So is William. De la Vega sees you both as threats." William's jaw tightened. "He's already sent people after us once. What's stopping him from trying again?" Reyes joined them, her expression grave as she reviewed the files. "Nothing, unless we act first. We'll use this to bring in protective measures, but you need to be ready. De la Vega won't sit idly by while we dismantle his empire." Victor leaned over the screen, his brow furrowed. "There's more here," he said, pointing to a spreadsheet. "These numbers, if I'm reading them right, de la Vega has backup funds stashed somewhere. Enough to rebuild his network if this all goes south." Reyes nodded. "We'll need to find and freeze those accounts. That's priority one. Without money, his power crumbles." William looked at Emily, his resolve hardening. "We need to finish this, Emily. Not just for us, but for everyone he's hurt." Emily met his gaze, her fear giving way to determination. "Then let's do it. Whatever it takes." The team worked late into the night, piecing together de la Vega's financial web and gathering evidence to submit to federal authorities. The camp was alive with activity, but beneath the progress was an undercurrent of urgency. De la Vega wouldn't wait long to make his next move, and neither could they. The early hours of the morning were filled with the hum of activity as the team worked tirelessly to process the evidence and strategize their next moves. The camp's dim lights cast long shadows, and the tension was palpable. The deeper they dug into de la Vega's files, the more they uncovered about his sprawling operation and its sinister reach. Clara and Victor sat at the command terminal, their eyes fixed on the screen as new files decrypted one by one. William stood nearby, arms crossed, his face a mask of focused determination. Emily sat beside him, scrolling through documents on a tablet, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Here's something," Victor said, his voice breaking the silence. He pointed to a series of transactions on the screen. "These transfers, they're recent, and they're linked to a shell company we hadn't flagged before. If I'm reading this right, de la Vega's been moving assets in real time, likely to cover his tracks." Clara leaned in, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "Got it. The company's called Meridian Holdings, registered in the Caymans. It's a front, but it's active. We might be able to intercept the funds before they're fully laundered." Reyes, who had been speaking with her agents, walked over to join them. Intercepting that money could cripple de la Vega's immediate response. "Can you track the transactions back to their source?" Clara nodded. "Give me a minute." Emily, still poring over documents, suddenly spoke up. "Wait. This memo, it's referencing a meeting. Today. De la Vega's people are gathering to discuss next steps." She pointed to the date and time. "It's in a few hours, at a private estate." Reyes's eyes narrowed. "That could be the break we need. If we can get eyes on that meeting, we might gather more evidence, or even catch de la Vega himself." William stepped forward. "How secure is the estate?" Reyes hesitated. "Extremely. High walls, armed guards, surveillance. It's not the kind of place we can just storm. But if we can get someone inside." Emily's voice was steady but firm. "I'll do it." William turned to her sharply. "Absolutely not. It's too dangerous." Emily met his gaze, her chin lifted. "Dad, I'm the last person they'd expect. I know how these people operate, I lived with one of them. I can do this." Reyes studied Emily, her expression thoughtful. "She has a point. Someone who doesn't look like a threat could get further than an agent in tactical gear." "No," William said firmly. "We'll find another way." Emily placed a hand on his arm. "Dad, I can do this. You've been protecting me my whole life, but now it's my turn to do something. For you. For us. For everyone de la Vega has hurt." The room fell silent. William's jaw clenched as he struggled with the decision. Finally, he exhaled, his shoulders sagging slightly. "If we do this, we do it right. Reyes, how do we keep her safe?" Reyes nodded, already shifting into planning mode. "We'll equip her with a covert comms device so we can monitor everything in real time. I'll send 2 agents undercover as backup, stationed nearby in case things go south. Clara can guide her through the estate's layout using schematics we've uncovered." Victor added, "If she can place a tracker on de la Vega or his top lieutenants, we can follow their movements after the meeting." William turned to Emily, his expression filled with both pride and fear. "You don't have to do this, Emily. There's no shame in stepping back." Emily shook her head. "I want to. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I can fight back. I won't let them take that away." The team moved quickly, briefing Emily on the plan and equipping her with a small earpiece and a discreet tracker disguised as a bracelet. They coached her on what to say, how to act, and how to signal for help if things went wrong. As dawn broke, Emily stood near the SUV, dressed in a sleek outfit that fit the profile of a guest at an exclusive gathering. William stood beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder. "Be careful," he said quietly. "And if anything feels wrong, you get out. Promise me." "I promise," Emily said, her voice steady. "We're going to end this, Dad." The SUV pulled away, carrying Emily and her undercover escorts toward the estate. William watched it disappear down the road, his heart heavy with both worry and hope. Back at the command post, the team prepared to monitor the operation. William stood by the comms terminal, his eyes fixed on the screen. "She'll be okay," Clara said softly, placing a hand on his arm. "She's stronger than you think." William nodded, though his jaw remained tight. "She's my daughter. And if anything happens to her, De La Vega won't need to worry about the law. He'll have me to answer to." As the team settled into position, the clock ticked down to the most critical moment of their mission yet. The stakes had never been higher, and every second felt like an eternity. The SUV rolled through the gated entrance of the estate, the imposing iron gates creaking open after a tense pause. Emily sat in the back seat, her heart pounding as she tried to maintain an air of calm. Her earpiece buzzed softly, Clara's voice coming through like a lifeline. "You're doing great, Emily," Clara said. "The estate is heavily surveilled, but we've got eyes on the exterior. Stick to the plan, and we'll guide you through." Emily took a deep breath and nodded subtly, knowing the tiny camera hidden in her bracelet would pick up her movements. The estate itself was a testament to De La Vega's wealth and power. A sprawling mansion surrounded by manicured gardens, with fountains and marble statues dotting the grounds. Armed guards patrolled discreetly, their presence felt more than seen. Emily's stomach churned, but she pushed the fear aside, focusing on the mission. The SUV came to a stop near the grand entrance. An attendant opened the door, offering a polite but scrutinizing smile. "Welcome, miss," he said. "Your name?" "Emily Carter," she said confidently, keeping her voice steady. The attendant checked a list and nodded, stepping aside to let her in. "Enjoy the gathering." Inside, the mansion was even more opulent. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, and the polished marble floors reflected the soft glow of the lights. Guests in elegant attire mingled, their conversations a low hum of sophistication and veiled agendas. Emily scanned the room, her eyes searching for anything out of place, or anyone who might recognize her. "Emily, you're doing great," Clara's voice came through. "De La Vega is likely in the private lounge on the second floor. There's a staircase to your left." Emily moved toward the staircase, keeping her pace casual. As she ascended, she felt the weight of every step, the world narrowing to the task ahead. Guards were stationed at the top, their sharp eyes assessing each guest who passed. "Act like you belong," Clara coached. "They're looking for uncertainty, not confidence." Emily gave the guards a polite nod as she passed, her heart hammering in her chest. To her relief, they didn't stop her. The second floor was quieter, the noise of the gathering below muffled by thick carpets and heavy doors. Emily followed Clara's guidance, moving toward the lounge. She reached a corner where a large painting hung, and Clara's voice buzzed again. "Stop here. That painting conceals a vent we identified earlier. Place the tracker on the frame, it's close enough to pick up De La Vega's movements." Emily reached into her clutch, pretending to adjust her lipstick, and slipped the tracker onto the back of the painting's frame. The magnetic device clicked softly into place. "Tracker is live," Clara confirmed. "Good work. Now move to the lounge entrance and keep your eyes open. You'll need to blend in for a few minutes." Emily walked to the lounge, where the sound of low voices filtered through the doors. She entered cautiously, finding a room filled with plush armchairs and dark wood paneling. A bar against one wall was manned by a uniformed bartender. In the center of the room stood De La Vega. His presence was unmistakable, tall, with a commanding aura that demanded attention. He was speaking to a group of men, his tone calm but authoritative. Emily felt a chill run down her spine but forced herself to stay composed. She moved to the bar, ordering a drink she didn't intend to touch, and positioned herself within earshot of the conversation. "Clara, I see him," Emily whispered, her lips barely moving. "Copy that," Clara replied. "Stay put. We're recording everything." De la Vega's words were measured but laced with menace. "The raid set us back, but it's a temporary inconvenience. The funds have already been moved, and new channels are in place. Our operation is secure." One of the men asked, "What about Carter? He's been a thorn in your side." De la Vega smiled coldly. "He's insignificant. A desperate man trying to protect his reputation. Let him think he's winning, it'll make his fall all the more satisfying." Emily's hand tightened on her glass, anger bubbling beneath the surface. She forced herself to stay calm, knowing any reaction could blow her cover. As the conversation continued, a man approached her, his sharp eyes scanning her face. "I don't think I've seen you before," he said, his tone polite but probing. Emily smiled, her heart racing. "I'm new to these circles. A friend invited me, said it would be enlightening." He studied her for a moment longer before nodding. "Enjoy the evening." As he walked away, Clara's voice buzzed urgently. "Emily, the guards are shifting. De la Vega's leaving the lounge. Stay on him, but keep your distance." Emily followed De la Vega at a safe distance as he exited the lounge and headed toward a private elevator. He stepped inside, and the doors closed behind him. "Damn," Clara muttered. "We lost visual. Emily, head back downstairs. We'll regroup once you're out." Emily turned to leave, but as she neared the staircase, a hand grabbed her arm. She spun around to see one of the guards, his expression suspicious. "You don't belong here," he said, his grip tightening. Panic surged through her, but before she could respond, Clara's voice came through, calm but urgent. "Emily, stall him. Backup is en route." Emily summoned every ounce of composure she had. "I was just leaving," she said, her voice steady. "I didn't mean to intrude." The guard narrowed his eyes, but before he could respond, the faint sound of commotion echoed from the first floor. Clara's voice cut in. "That's our distraction. Move, now." Emily yanked her arm free and bolted down the stairs, her heart pounding. Guests were scattering, and guards were distracted by the noise. She slipped through the crowd and out the door, where the SUV was waiting. William's voice came through the earpiece as she climbed in. "Emily, are you okay?" "I'm fine," she said, breathless but relieved. "I got the tracker in place. Let's finish this." The SUV sped away, the mansion shrinking into the distance as the team regrouped to prepare for the next move. The SUV raced through the quiet, tree-lined roads away from the estate. Emily sat in the back seat, clutching the armrest as her adrenaline began to fade. Her breaths were shallow, her heart still pounding from the close call with the guard. Across from her, one of Reyes's undercover agents, a calm woman named Jordan, kept an eye on the road while speaking into a discreet radio. "Package secured," Jordan said, her tone steady. "No pursuit detected. Returning to the rendezvous point." Emily leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment. Her earpiece buzzed with Clara's voice. "Emily, you did amazing. The tracker is active, and we've already picked up some movement. De la Vega's car left the estate 5 minutes ago." Emily opened her eyes and exhaled. "Where's he going?" Clara's voice was clipped with focus. "We're running it down now. Looks like he's heading to one of his backup locations, a private airstrip. If he's trying to flee, we need to act fast." Emily sat up, her hands gripping the edge of her seat. "What do we do?" "We intercept," William's voice cut in, firm and decisive. Emily, you're out of this now. You've done your part. Let Reyes and her team handle the rest. No, Emily said quickly, her voice steady despite the knot of fear in her stomach. I've come this far. I'm staying with you. William hesitated, his silence speaking volumes, but he finally relented. Stay in the SUV. No risks, Emily. Promise me. I promise, she said, though she wasn't sure if she meant it. The SUV veered onto a side road leading toward the command post, but just before they arrived, Jordan's radio crackled with urgency. Change of plans, Reyes's voice came through. De La Vega's convoy has stopped at a secondary location, a safe house. Sending coordinates now. The driver glanced back at Emily and Jordan. We heading there? Jordan nodded, already pulling up the coordinates on her tablet. Let's move. This could be our chance to corner him before he disappears. The vehicle sped up, the forest blurring past. Emily tightened her seatbelt, bracing herself for whatever came next. Minutes later, they arrived near the coordinates, a secluded property hidden behind dense trees. The safe house was a modern, fortified structure with high walls and a single gate. Several SUVs were parked inside, their engines still warm, suggesting recent arrivals. Reyes's voice came through again. Teams are in position. No sign of De La Vega yet, but his men are guarding the perimeter. We go in quiet, take them out before he knows we're here. From her spot in the SUV, Emily watched as Reyes's agents moved into position, their dark uniforms blending seamlessly with the shadows. She felt a pang of frustration and helplessness. Sitting in the car while others risked everything felt wrong, even if it was the safest choice. Emily, William's voice came through the earpiece. Stay where you are. This is the final push. We can't afford any mistakes. I know, she replied softly, though her fingers itched to do something, anything, to help. The operation began with eerie precision. Reyes's team moved silently through the perimeter, neutralizing guards with tranquilizers in hand-to-hand combat. Emily could only catch glimpses through the gaps in the foliage, but she felt the tension in the air like a coiled spring. Perimeter secure, Reyes's voice finally came through. Moving to the interior. The team breached the main building, their movements swift and efficient. Inside, muffled shouts and the thud of footsteps echoed, followed by brief bursts of gunfire. William's voice buzzed in Emily's ear, tight with concern. Reyes, status? Encountering resistance, Reyes replied. They're putting up a fight, but we're holding. Pushing toward the central room, stand by. Minutes felt like hours as Emily waited, her hands trembling slightly despite her best efforts to stay calm. Finally, Reyes's voice returned, triumphant but breathless. Target secured. De La Vega is in custody. Repeat, De La Vega is in custody. Relief flooded Emily's chest as she sagged against the seat. William's voice came through, this time filled with both exhaustion and pride. We did it. Emily, it's over. But as soon as the words left his mouth, an explosion rocked the property, the force of it shaking the SUV and sending a plume of smoke into the night sky. Reyes. William shouted through the comms. What just happened? Reyes's response crackled through, strained and chaotic. Booby trap, secondary explosives. We're secure, but they're trying to cover their tracks. De La Vega's men are regrouping outside. We need backup now. Emily's instincts kicked in before she could think. She grabbed the spare comms unit and opened the SUV door, ignoring Jordan's protests. Emily. William's voice thundered through the earpiece. Get back in the car. No, she said, her voice steady. I can help. I have to. As chaos erupted around the safe house, Emily steeled herself. The endgame was here, and she refused to stand by and watch. The night exploded into chaos as Emily darted from the SUV, her heart pounding with both fear and determination. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid scent of burning debris. Shouts and gunfire echoed across the property as Reyes's team worked to secure their position against De La Vega's regrouping men. "Emily, get back to the car. Now!" William's voice roared through the earpiece, his tone a mix of panic and anger. But Emily couldn't turn back. She crouched low, using the shadows and wreckage for cover as she made her way toward the safe house. Her fingers clenched around the comms unit, her knuckles white. "Clara," she whispered, her voice trembling but firm. "I need guidance. Where's the safest way in?" Clara's voice crackled in her ear, tense but composed. "Emily, this isn't your fight. Clara, please. If I can help, tell me how." A brief pause, then Clara relented, her tone sharpening into focus. "Fine. There's an opening near the north side, a break in the wall from the explosion. It'll get you closer to the interior without crossing the main firefight." Emily turned toward the north side, her movements quick but cautious. The glow of the fire from the explosion lit her path, casting flickering shadows that made the world feel like a waking nightmare. As she reached the break in the wall, she heard another voice in her earpiece, "Reyes. Who the hell is in the field? This area isn't secure." "It's Emily," William barked. "She disobeyed orders. I'm going after her." "No," Reyes snapped. "You stay put. We can't lose control of this situation. I'll handle it." Emily slipped through the gap in the wall and into the remains of what had been a storage room. Debris was scattered everywhere, and the air was thick with dust. She coughed, covering her mouth as she scanned her surroundings. "Emily," Clara's voice guided her, "you're close to the central room. De La Vega is likely secured there. But you need to stay hidden. Don't engage." "I just need to see," Emily replied, moving further into the building. As she crept closer, voices became clearer. She recognized Reyes, her tone sharp and commanding, but another voice sent a chill down her spine, "De La Vega. You think you've won?" De La Vega's voice was cold, dripping with venom. "You've merely slowed the inevitable. Men like me don't fall. We adapt." Emily pressed herself against a wall, peeking into the room. Reyes and her team had De La Vega surrounded, his wrists bound behind his back. Despite his captivity, his presence was imposing, his eyes gleaming with malice. Reyes's response was unwavering. "You're finished, De La Vega. Your empire is crumbling, and there's no one left to pull you out." De La Vega smirked. "You underestimate the reach of power. Even now, my men are ensuring that none of you leave here alive." As if on cue, gunfire erupted outside, louder and more concentrated. Emily's stomach clenched as she realized De La Vega's reinforcements were making a final push. "We've got incoming," one of Reyes's agents shouted, his hand on his earpiece. Reyes turned to her team. "Hold the line. Don't let them breach the building." Emily's gaze darted around the room, landing on a map spread out on a table near De La Vega. She noticed red circles and arrows marked across it, likely detailing escape routes and fallback plans. "Clara," Emily whispered, "there's a map in here. It looks like it has his plans." Clara's response was instant. "Emily, do not go for it. Wait for backup." But Emily saw her chance. With Reyes and her team focused on De La Vega and the escalating fight outside, she darted into the room, grabbing the map before anyone could react. "Emily!" Reyes barked, her voice laced with shock and anger. De La Vega's eyes locked onto Emily, his smirk deepening. "Ah, the brave little girl. The daughter of the man who thought he could challenge me." Emily ignored him, clutching the map tightly as she backed toward the door. "I'm not afraid of you." Reyes stepped between Emily and De La Vega, her expression fierce. "Get out of here, now." Emily hesitated for a heartbeat, then turned and bolted, the sound of renewed gunfire spurring her forward. As she reached the exit, her earpiece buzzed with William's voice, frantic. "Emily, where are you?" "I've got something important," she panted, emerging into the chaos outside. "I'm heading back now." Before she could take another step, a figure loomed out of the shadows, a guard with a rifle aimed directly at her. Time seemed to slow as Emily froze, her mind racing. The guard's finger tightened on the trigger. A gunshot rang out, but it wasn't the guard's. He crumpled to the ground, and behind him stood William, his face pale but resolute. "Emily," he said, his voice trembling with relief and anger, "what the hell were you thinking?" "I got the map," she said, holding it up as tears welled in her eyes. "It shows his escape routes. It's what we needed." William pulled her into a fierce hug, his voice shaking. "You scared me half to death." The two turned as Reyes's team emerged from the building, escorting a furious De La Vega. The fight was over, but the cost was still unfolding. "Let's end this," William said, his arm protectively around Emily. "Once and for all." The aftermath of the battle unfolded in a whirlwind of activity. De La Vega was secured in the back of a reinforced vehicle, his expression twisted into a mask of cold defiance. His men had been subdued or fled, leaving behind weapons and scattered evidence. The compound, once a symbol of his empire's power, now lay in ruins, the air thick with smoke and tension. Emily stood beside William, still clutching the map she had risked everything to retrieve. Her breathing was uneven, but her grip on the document was firm. Reyes approached them, her face a mix of frustration and reluctant admiration. "You shouldn't have gone in," Reyes said, her tone sharp but not unkind. "But, that map might just be the key to finishing this." Emily nodded, her voice quiet but steady. "I couldn't stand by. Not when I could do something." William's hand rested protectively on Emily's shoulder. "She shouldn't have had to do something. That's our job." Reyes sighed, rubbing her temples. "What's done is done. Let's see what we're dealing with." They moved to a makeshift command post near the edge of the property. Clara quickly spread the map out on a table, her sharp eyes scanning the markings. Victor joined her, pointing to the red circles and arrows. "These are fallback points," Victor said. "Safe houses, likely stocked with resources for his network. If we hit these, we can dismantle what's left of his operation." Clara nodded. "And this," she pointed to a heavily marked area near the coast, "this looks like a staging ground. If De La Vega was planning to move assets or people, it would happen here." Reyes leaned over the map, her expression serious. "If we can confirm that, we can cut off his escape entirely. But we'll need to move fast. He won't stay in custody long if his allies intervene." Emily frowned. "What about the people he bribed? The politicians, the executives? Won't they try to protect him?" "They'll try," Reyes said, "but with the evidence we've gathered, they'll be scrambling to cover their own tracks. That's why we need to act now, while they're vulnerable." Victor looked at William. "Are you ready for this? Once we move on these locations, there's no turning back. De La Vega's allies will retaliate, and it won't just be legal. It'll be personal." William's jaw tightened, his eyes hard. "They've already made it personal. We finish this." Reyes began issuing orders to her team, coordinating with federal agencies to plan simultaneous raids on the identified locations. The room buzzed with urgency as maps were updated, resources allocated, and agents briefed. As the preparations continued, Emily stepped outside for a moment of air. The night was quiet now, the chaos of the fight replaced by an eerie stillness. She leaned against a tree, staring at the stars. William joined her, his footsteps soft on the grass. He stood beside her, following her gaze upward. "You were brave in there," he said after a moment. Emily shook her head. "I was reckless. I scared you." Yes, you did, William admitted. But you also showed more courage than most people ever would. You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for. Emily turned to him, her eyes glistening. I just wanted to help. I didn't want to feel powerless anymore. William placed a hand on her cheek, his voice gentle. You've never been powerless, Emily. Jack tried to make you believe that, but he was wrong. You're capable of so much more than he, or even I, ever imagined. Before Emily could respond, Reyes called out from the command post. We've got movement on the tracker. They hurried back inside, where Clara was pointing to a monitor displaying a live feed of coordinates. It's the staging ground, Clara confirmed. De La Vega's network is regrouping there. This is our chance to cut them off for good. Reyes turned to her team, her voice firm. We move now. No delays. This ends tonight. As the vehicles prepared to depart, William and Emily stood together, their determination unwavering. The final confrontation was coming, and they were ready to face it, together. The convoy of vehicles roared down the coastal road, their headlights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. Inside one of the LED SUVs, William and Emily sat with Reyes and Clara, the air thick with anticipation. Maps and tablets were spread out between them, displaying live updates from surveillance drones and agents in the field. Clara tapped on her screen, highlighting the staging ground. We've confirmed at least 24 operatives on site. They're armed and preparing to move. De La Vega's closest allies are likely among them. Reyes nodded, her gaze sharp. We'll split into 2 teams. Team 1 secures the perimeter and handles the guards. Team 2 breaches the main building and retrieves the intel. No one gets out unless we say so. William leaned forward, studying the map. What about escape routes? If they've got boats or vehicles ready, we need to cut those off first. Already covered, Reyes said. We've got agents stationed along the road and the coastline. If they try to flee, we'll intercept. Emily, sitting quietly until now, glanced at the screen. What happens if De La Vega's men have backup waiting? What if this is a trap? Reyes met her gaze. Then we adapt. We're not walking into this blind, Emily. But you're right to be cautious. That's why we're hitting them hard and fast. As the convoy approached the staging ground, the vehicles slowed, pulling off the road into dense cover. Reyes's team moved into action with practiced precision, unloading gear and positioning themselves for the assault. Drones buzzed overhead, providing a real-time view of the compound, a collection of warehouses and docks lit by harsh floodlights. William and Emily stayed behind with Clara, watching the operation unfold on the monitors. Reyes's voice crackled through the comms, issuing orders. Team 1, move in on the north side. Neutralize guards and secure the gate. Team 2, stand by for breach. Through the drone feed, Emily watched as Team 1 advanced, their dark figures slipping through the shadows. Suppressed gunfire echoed faintly as guards were taken down one by one. North side secure, came the voice of one of Reyes's agents. Team 2, go. Reyes commanded. The second team surged forward, breaching the main warehouse with a thunderous explosion. The drone's camera zoomed in, capturing the chaos inside, De La Vega's men scrambling to respond, some abandoning their positions while others fired wildly. Reyes's voice was steady despite the chaos. Push forward. Secure the package. Emily gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. What's happening? Clara scanned the monitors, her fingers flying over the keyboard. They're cornering De La Vega's inner circle. Looks like he left instructions to destroy the evidence if this happened. We need to move fast. Inside the warehouse, Reyes and her team reached the central office, where a small group of men was attempting to burn documents and smash hard drives. The agents quickly subdued them, securing the evidence before it could be destroyed. We've got the data, Reyes reported. clearing the remaining operatives now. Suddenly, the drone feed shifted. A vehicle sped out from the back of the compound, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Clara zoomed in, her eyes narrowing. "We've got a runner." "It's De La Vega," William said, his voice tight. Reyes's voice came through, urgent. "Pursuit team, intercept that vehicle. Do not let him escape." One of the SUVs peeled off, its engine roaring as it chased after De La Vega's car. Emily's heart raced as she watched the pursuit unfold on the monitor. The vehicles weaved through narrow dirt roads, the distance between them shrinking with each turn. "Block him off at the bridge," Reyes commanded. Ahead, agents had set up a makeshift barricade. De La Vega's car skidded to a halt, the driver realizing too late that there was no escape. Armed agents surrounded the vehicle, their weapons trained on it. "De La Vega, step out with your hands up," an agent shouted. The car door opened slowly, and De La Vega emerged, his movements deliberate. His face was a mask of calm, but his eyes burned with defiance. "You think this is the end?" he said, his voice cold. "You've won a battle, not the war. Men like me are inevitable." Reyes approached him, her weapon steady. "You're done, De La Vega. Your empire is ashes, and there's no one left to pull you out." De La Vega smirked. "We'll see." The agents cuffed him and escorted him to one of the vehicles. From the command post, Emily watched the scene unfold, her chest tight with a mix of relief and disbelief. "It's over," Clara said softly. William placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. "You did it. We did it." Emily turned to him, her eyes glistening. "Is it really over, Dad? Or will someone else just take his place?" William's expression was firm. "Maybe. But people like De La Vega thrive on fear and silence. You broke that cycle, Emily. You stood up. That's what matters." As the convoy began its return to the command post, the weight of the moment settled over them. The fight had cost them more than they could measure, but for the first time, there was a glimmer of hope. De La Vega's reign was over, and though the road ahead would be long, they had won a victory that could not be undone. The convoy returned to the command post just as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, bathing the forest in a soft, golden glow. The team disembarked, their exhaustion evident but tempered by a sense of accomplishment. De La Vega, handcuffed and flanked by agents, was led to a secure vehicle awaiting transport to federal custody. His icy glare was a sharp contrast to the quiet satisfaction radiating from Reyes and her team. Inside the command post, the atmosphere was one of relief mixed with subdued celebration. Clara and Victor immediately dove into the evidence retrieved from the staging ground, their screens lighting up with data that would further solidify the case against De La Vega's network. Emily and William sat together in a quiet corner, their adrenaline finally beginning to wane. William handed her a bottle of water, and she accepted it with a small, tired smile. "You did it," he said softly. "You stood up to him. To all of them." Emily shook her head. "We did it, Dad. I couldn't have done any of this without you." William's expression softened, his pride evident. "You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for. And braver than I could have imagined." Before they could say more, Reyes approached, her demeanor as composed as ever despite the long night. "We've secured the area and catalogued the evidence. De La Vega's going away for a long time, if not for life." William stood, extending a hand. "Thank you, Reyes. For everything. We couldn't have done this without you." Reyes shook his hand firmly. "It was a team effort. But you too," she glanced at Emily, "you're the reason this happened. Your courage and persistence made all the difference." Emily's cheeks flushed, but she met Reyes's gaze with quiet determination. "I just didn't want to feel helpless anymore. I wanted to make sure no one else has to go through what I did." Reyes nodded, a flicker of respect crossing her face. You succeeded. And you've set something in motion that's going to ripple far beyond this night. As Reyes returned to her team, Clara waved William and Emily over to her workstation. We've started digging into the new data, Clara said, her fingers flying over the keyboard. This network was even bigger than we thought. Politicians, corporate executives, international players, they were all tied to De La Vega. With this evidence, we can take down more than just him. We can dismantle the entire system. Victor chimed in, a rare smile breaking through his usual seriousness. And the public will know the truth. We'll make sure of that. Emily leaned forward, her voice quiet but resolute. It's not just about the arrests. It's about making sure people like them can't do this again. We have to protect the people they've hurt. Clara nodded. And we will. This is just the beginning. As the morning wore on, the team began wrapping up their work. De La Vega was transferred into federal custody, and the command post was dismantled. The once tense atmosphere gave way to a sense of closure, though everyone knew the fight wasn't entirely over. Later, as Emily and William prepared to leave, they stood together on the edge of the forest, the sunlight filtering through the trees. What now? Emily asked, her voice filled with both hope and uncertainty. William smiled, placing an arm around her shoulders. Now we rebuild. For you, for me, for everyone who's been hurt by this. And we make sure the people we care about know they're never alone. Emily looked up at him, her expression thoughtful. Do you think things will ever feel normal again? Maybe not the old normal, William admitted. But a new kind of normal. One where you're safe and happy. I think we can get there. She nodded, a small but genuine smile tugging at her lips. Then let's get started. As they walked toward their car, the weight of the past began to lift, replaced by the promise of a brighter future. The battle against De La Vega had been grueling, but it had also forged something unbreakable, a bond of resilience, a sense of purpose, and the knowledge that even in the face of darkness, hope could prevail. The story of their fight would echo far beyond that forest, a reminder that even the smallest acts of courage could spark a revolution. Together, they had not only survived, they had won. And that victory would carry them forward into whatever came next.